Family drama unleashed. Sister-in-law's selfish shenanigans and sweet karma. Sister-in-law goes no contact over $10. Buckle up, because I've been holding this long story in for a long time. And when I tell you this is a hot mess, this is a hot, steaming, bubbling mess of a mess. My sister-in-law has cut all ties with me and hubby, telling us that she wants nothing to do with us ever again because their mother-in-law asked her for $10 and we had the audacity to side with mother-in-law when sister-in-law refused. Sounds petty? It is. Sounds simple? Not exactly. Edit. For context, this story doesn't occur in the US. This is all happening in the Caribbean. So for those confused by the use of the term mummy, which I think is such a cute cultural debate so far here, it's totally normal for grown adults to call their parents mummy and daddy out of respect. It's also the reason for certain healthcare, car, and labor oddities. A lot of us in my country still haven't recovered from the pandemic because the tourism industry is only just reopening in full force, and that's the industry 70% of the working population relied on. Hubby has 3 siblings. Brother number 1 will watch you drown to save some rope. Brother number 2 is the sweetest, but a bit naive. And sister-in-law? Oh boy, I don't have anything to compare her to, but I think the title should hint at how bad she is. For your information, sister-in-law is the baby of the family and the only girl. She was spoiled rotten before their parents split up, and things only got worse once the separation became permanent. Sister-in-law would play parent against parent and throw her brothers under the bus regularly. Hubby and I watched sister-in-law's behavior get more and more toxic as she grew into an adult, but there was no talking to mother-in-law or father-in-law. Both parents felt guilty about the fact that, of the siblings, sister-in-law was the one to grow up in the broken home, so they excused every tantrum, every snarky remark, and every selfish act. Once, when she was 12, sister-in-law stole a pair of my sexy panties from the dryer. Hubby and I lived in the same duplex as mother-in-law for a while. I actually thought the panties had been sacrificed to the dryer instead of the sock that cycle. That was until a month later, I saw sister-in-law throw the panties into our kitchen through the open back door. When I went over to their apartment to ask sister-in-law why she stole the panties, mother-in-law got upset at me and told hubby to make me apologize to sister-in-law for accusing her of something I saw her do with my own eyes. Sister-in-law had the family wrapped around her little finger. Fast forward to 2020. All the siblings were in their early to late 20s. Brother-in-law 1, brother-in-law 2, and sister-in-law decided to remain living with mother-in-law because she only had them pay $200 each a month for rent, utilities, and groceries. Mother-in-law still felt guilty about breaking up the family, so she sacrificed her freedom and needs to take responsibility for more than half the monthly expenses while her kids partied the land down. I mean, they literally partied the land down. One summer, mother-in-law couldn't even afford shoes for work, but sister-in-law went on a week's vacation abroad. But something else happened in 2020, right? Enter the pandemic. Mother-in-law was laid off permanently from her job, so she looked to her adult children for financial support until she could find a new job. I emphasize adult because at some point in our lives, children will have to help their parents. We just had to start a bit earlier, but it wasn't going to be for the rest of mother-in-law's life just yet. The 4 siblings just had to hold down the fort until mother-in-law found a new job. Simple. Well, brother-in-law 1 wasn't pleased, but he's reasonable once you get him to sit down and listen to sense. Brother-in-law 2 rolled with the punches. Sister-in-law, however, after 5 months, sister-in-law moved out to live with her boyfriend without warning. All sister-in-law said as she packed her things was, "I'm too young to take care of you, Mummy. I have my own life to live." Never mind her brother-in-law 1 and brother-in-law 2 and hubby were all chipping in equally. Apparently, sister-in-law had been carrying the load all by herself and she just had enough. She was so tired that sister-in-law left her dog for mother-in-law to take care of with no money. We were all speechless. Not only had sister-in-law been living with mother-in-law for almost 2 years, paying practically nothing, but mother-in-law called in a favor with a friend to get sister-in-law a job right out of high school. Sister-in-law didn't even have to apply. What's worse, mother-in-law, with the help of me and hubby, bought sister-in-law a car with no expectation of ever being repaid, and you better believe sister-in-law never offered to pay us back either. Without mother-in-law's help, sister-in-law would have had nothing, but sister-in-law left mother-in-law up Crap Creek without a paddle, and mother-in-law lost her apartment. While hubby and his family have learned to take sister-in-law's abuse with a stoops and an eye roll, her boyfriend was no such sucker. Sister-in-law's boyfriend dumped her after a year. The saint, I'm surprised he held on that long, and told sister-in-law to scram. And guess who she came bawling back to? Mother-in-law. And guess who took her in without a peep? Mother-in-law. I was disgusted. because sister-in-law had abandoned the family. Brother-in-law 1 had moved in with his girlfriend, and brother-in-law 2 had been forced to find an apartment and take mother-in-law in. Yet there sister-in-law was, sleeping on brother-in-law 2's couch. But I'm only the daughter-in-law. I can't tell a mother how to handle her child. I tell hubby my thoughts, of course, but he's such a softie. He and mother-in-law helped sister-in-law find her own apartment, since brother-in-law 2 couldn't accommodate sister-in-law long term. And when she gets evicted after a year for being a brat to her landlord all the time, mother-in-law and hubby helped sister-in-law find another apartment. I even gave sister-in-law $700 from my personal savings so that she could pay the deposit on the place. Now we're finally getting to the real story. So, we loaned sister-in-law the $700 in the summer of 2022 with the expectation that she'd pay me back at least $100 a month. The operative word is expectation. But the reality was that sister-in-law didn't pay us back at all. Every month she had an excuse for hubby as to why she couldn't pay us the increments.
Oh, I had to buy a new battery for my car. Oh, I had to go to the doctor and it was so expensive. Oh, I had to buy a new battery for my car.
Wait, didn't I say that one about the battery already? Yep, sister-in-law actually used that excuse twice. I had already resigned myself to the cold reality that I'd never get the $700 back. We're not well off by any means, hubby and I, but we're not stingy. If the family needs help, we help. But rarely do we receive any thanks or compensation. I've grown used to it. So when sister-in-law slunked on paying us back, I didn't make a fuss. Yes, I knew she was splurging money on Shein every week and $20 lunches every day that she would flaunt in front of mother-in-law, who was still without a job 2 years later because the economy got so bad. But what could I do? I was more upset that sister-in-law would actually leave work every day to eat her $20 sushi bento box at mother-in-law's place without ever offering mother-in-law a bite, let alone a plate. But this is how the $10 debacle started. Mother-in-law was still living with brother-in-law 2, and brother-in-law 2 was getting tired. See, even though the three brothers were equally supporting mother-in-law until she got her life together again, brother-in-law 2 had to live with her. That meant his social and romantic life had come to a halt. Not to mention he was responsible for mother-in-law's pets and sister-in-law's dog. Brother-in-law 2 had the added pressure of paying for extra utility use and the responsibility of transporting mother-in-law and the pets around. Notice, I never said anything about sister-in-law helping out. Well, that's because in sister-in-law's mind, she provided a different kind of support. Every purple moon, sister-in-law would let mother-in-law crash on her couch. No, she didn't let mother-in-law live with her. She'd essentially invite mother-in-law over for a sleepover every once in a while. Then the next day, sister-in-law would ship mother-in-law back to brother-in-law 2's place. Never mind brother-in-law 2 was already taking care of sister-in-law's dog. Never mind brother-in-law 2 already supported mother-in-law financially and kept a roof over mother-in-law's head. But the sad thing is that mother-in-law adored her sleepovers with sister-in-law. She looked forward to the mother-daughter time, even though we all knew that time was spent at home on the couch watching Netflix. Brother-in-law 2 wasn't pleased with the favoritism. Anyway, mother-in-law was at sister-in-law's apartment for one of the rare sleepovers, and she was strapped for cash. She needed toothpaste and dog food for the critters, so mother-in-law asked sister-in-law for $10. Hubby and I found out because half an hour later, hubby got this phone call.
Hubby, something's gotta give with Mummy.
What? Is Mummy being stubborn about something?
No, I just can't deal with her asking for money anymore.
Okay, first of all, that's not what the expression means. Secondly, what do you mean? You don't support Mummy financially. We boys do.
Excuse me? I do a lot for Mummy, okay?
Okay. Whatever you say. What happened? Sister-in-law proceeds to tell hubby about the $10 request. He puts his phone on speaker so that I can hear this utter rubbish.
Honestly, hubby, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. Mummy's gonna break me.
Really, sister-in-law? $10 is gonna break you? Sister-in-law doesn't take too kindly to this retort, so she proceeds to list the following excuses as to why she doesn't have $10 to give mother-in-law, followed by hubby's rejoinders.
I have a car loan to pay.
No, you don't. We helped Mummy buy the car for you in full.
I have car insurance to pay each month.
Since when does anyone pay car insurance monthly? That's an annual fee.
Well, I have utilities to pay.
No, you don't. Your rent is all inclusive.
Not Netflix. I had to pay my Netflix bill, you know.
You had to pay for Netflix? Are you effing serious? That's your excuse? At this point, hubby has had enough, but he knows sister-in-law by now. If he rails on her like he wants to, she'll shut down. So, being a good big brother, he offers advice instead. Okay, sister-in-law, it seems like you're having trouble budgeting your money. Mother-in-law isn't wrong for asking for $10.
But I need gas in my car.
Listen, I get it. You don't have $10. Roll eyes. But the issue is that you never seem to have money when the family needs you, but you seem to be able to find money for frivolous things like bento box lunches and shine orders.
What I do with my effing money is my effing business.
Calm down, I'm just saying that you need to manage your money better. So, how much is your weekly salary? Silence. Hubby repeats the question. Sister-in-law finally answers very, very quietly.
Like 4 something?
You mean like $4.50?
Yes.
Hubby pulls out the old Excel budget file we've been using for years. He sets up a budget for sister-in-law. Then he asks her how much money she has left for the coming week.
Not enough to give Mummy $10.
Please stop being belligerent. And this was the straw that breaks sister-in-law's back. Sister-in-law pops off. She won't stand for this treatment. Hubby has no right to make sister-in-law feel bad for not giving mother-in-law $10. If sister-in-law says she doesn't have $10, she doesn't have $10. Why is everyone always so mean to her? Why is everyone always attacking sister-in-law? After all sister-in-law does for mother-in-law, no one respects her. Sister-in-law lets mother-in-law sleep on her couch. Sister-in-law lets mother-in-law use her Netflix. Oh, bravo. You let Mummy sleep on your couch and soak up the internet your landlord pays for. Thanks to you, Mummy doesn't have to sleep on the street tonight.
You know what? Maybe she effing should. I'm not the mother. I have my own money and my own life to live. If I want to buy effing sushi every day for lunch, I should be able to.
Yeah, you can afford to eat sushi every day, but you haven't paid OP back a single cent of the $700 she loaned you in the summer for the roof over your head.
You know what? F you, F OP, and F Mommy. I'm done with this family.
Then she hangs up. People, within 2 minutes I get a notification from my bank. Remember how sister-in-law had so many expenses and couldn't afford to pay us back that $700? Remember how she had so many bills that month that she couldn't give mother-in-law $10? Well, rassiclat, sister-in-law sent me the full $700. She had it the entire time. She'd simply decided for months that she wasn't going to rush to pay it back. Hell, she probably thought she'd never pay it back at all. But that's not the worst of it. Mother-in-law calls. She wants to know what happened. Sister-in-law called her minutes before to tell mother-in-law that she transferred $50 into mother-in-law's account, and that would be the last $50 mother-in-law was ever going to get from sister-in-law. Sister-in-law then told mother-in-law to have a nice life and to never contact her again. By dang. Of course, hubby is furious. The scheming brat had been cheating all of us. She'd taken the entire family for a ride. He tries to call sister-in-law to reprimand her for being so evil to mother-in-law. But guess what? Sister-in-law has blocked hubby everywhere. Mother-in-law and hubby talk about the situation. After all this, hubby is still concerned about sister-in-law's well-being. Hubby tells mother-in-law about the budget he'd worked on for sister-in-law to help her. If she's only making $4.50 a week, sister-in-law needs to be more careful with her money. $4.50? Sister-in-law doesn't make $4.50 a week. She makes $6.50. Reddit, I literally fell on the floor. This witch. Sister-in-law lied to hubby about her weekly salary just to get out of giving mother-in-law $10 effing dollars. At this point, mother-in-law realizes sister-in-law doesn't care about anyone but herself. It hurts because sister-in-law is mother-in-law's only daughter. But mother-in-law agrees with hubby that this behavior can't be accepted. Hubby makes a pact with mother-in-law to go no contact with sister-in-law since sister-in-law believes that she doesn't need her family. So then, tell me why brother-in-law too calls us a week later to tell us that mother-in-law is babysitting sister-in-law's new dog. You heard me. New dog. Not the dog brother-in-law too is taking care of. Sister-in-law got a new dog, and the moment mother-in-law saw sister-in-law's name on her phone screen, she took the call. This was about 4 months ago now, and sister-in-law and mother-in-law seemed to be right as rain with each other. Even though sister-in-law said point blank that mother-in-law should sleep on the street, mother-in-law accepted seeing her back with no request for an apology. As for us, sister-in-law still has hubby blocked on all platforms. I guess we're the bad guys after all. How dare we call sister-in-law out on her crap and make her feel bad for not giving mother-in-law $10, right? Wow, what an entitlement and manipulation roller coaster. The sister-in-law's actions are blatantly self-centered and disrespectful, and it is obvious that she has been abusing the family's generosity for an excessive amount of time. It irritates me that mother-in-law still supports sister-in-law's actions in spite of everything that has happened. By establishing boundaries and cutting off contact with the sister-in-law, hubby made the right decision. It's time for sister-in-law to accept responsibility for her actions and understand that she cannot use her family as pawns. Update. It's been a while since things went down with my sister-in-law, who cut contact with me and dear husband because we thought she was being unreasonable and selfish when she denied mother-in-law $10, which you can read here, but I finally have an update, and I am cackling. Apparently, after sister-in-law reconnected with mother-in-law a week after she told mother-in-law to jump off a bridge, mother-in-law and sister-in-law started hatching a plan to move in together. They just had to wait until sister-in-law's lease ended in June. Well, April came, and brother-in-law 2 was anxious for news. He wants his space back to himself after almost 2 years of housing mother-in-law. He wants to vape and drink a glass of whiskey without mother-in-law nagging him. He wants to bring a girl over to wine and dine. He wants to choke the chicken without mother-in-law snoring in the next room. But mother-in-law has no answer for him. Well, I guess mother-in-law asked sister-in-law for that answer because sister-in-law blew up. First, she called brother-in-law 2 and told him to keep his nose out of her butt and proceeded to block him on all platforms. A week later, sister-in-law called mother-in-law and said that mother-in-law is too toxic to have in her life. And not only will sister-in-law no longer be moving in with mother-in-law, but sister-in-law is going no contact with everyone. Mother-in-law cried to dear husband. We rolled our eyes and shrugged because we definitely didn't see that coming. Then, just this Saturday, brother-in-law 2 got a notification from his bank. Someone had transferred $50 to his account. He was confused and decided to wait to see who had sent it. Not an hour later, he got a call from an unknown number. It was sister-in-law. Apparently, sister-in-law bummed father-in-law for $50, but the easiest and quickest way to get her the money was to send it to brother-in-law 2. So, because every other person in the world is a side character in sister-in-law's personal soap opera, only present to push her own narrative forward, sister-in-law told father-in-law to transfer the money to brother-in-law 2 without asking brother-in-law 2 for permission. Then, she unblocked brother-in-law 2 only long enough to command him to withdraw the money ASAP so that she can swing by his apartment to pick it up. Brother-in-law 2 burst out laughing. He didn't even have the breath to tell sister-in-law to F off. He just laughed and hung up the phone. Brother-in-law 2 called dear husband, and since father-in-law didn't even wish either guy happy birthday this year, the brothers decided to use the $50 as a gift from deadbeat Papa to buy drinks for a shindig they'd planned on having for their uncle, who came in on Friday from Europe. The party was yesterday, and all the family, excluding father-in-law because this is mother-in-law's brother, came together to drink, talk crap, and be merry. Significant others were invited, but I couldn't go because I have the cold. Boy, I wish I'd went anyway. Their husband came home laughing. Apparently sister-in-law really needed that $50 because she hounded and harassed brother-in-law 2 non-stop. Finally, he relented and told her that she could come get the money at 12, 2 hours before the party was to start. He did it to avoid inviting her to the party, but also to avoid hurting her feelings. However, the Queen of Sheba does all things on her own time, and so she arrived at the height of the party. People were laughing, grilling, and having a merry time without her. Of course, the uncle felt bad for sister-in-law, especially because he didn't know the situation. He asked sister-in-law to stay and grab a plate, but sister-in-law said,
"Oh no, I have other places to be,"
and then huffed off to her car, sped away in dramatic fashion, cloud of dust and all. Dear husband says for a good hour everyone talked about what a stink woman sister-in-law turned out to be and how sorry they were that the brothers had to deal with such a sour sister. But no one said this to mother-in-law. It was pretty clear to everyone where sister-in-law got her ways from. But better yet, brother-in-law 1 got a message soon after sister-in-law left. In fact, it was sister-in-law. She wanted to know if brother-in-law 2 and mother-in-law had invited him and dear husband to the party. When brother-in-law 1 said yes, sister-in-law sent a voice note ranting about how much she hates her brothers and her mother, and cried about how no one appreciates family and how everyone always treats her like a dog. But she didn't care because F all of us. But, pray tell, how could she expect anyone to invite her to anything if she's cut contact with every bloody body? Ah, it ain't much, but ain't karma sweet? Well, it appears that sister-in-law's true colors are once again showing. She has nothing but self-centered and manipulative interactions and behavior. She obviously enjoys drama and attention, which leads to unneeded chaos in the family. It is clear how little regard she has for other people when she blocks brother-in-law 2, then abruptly reaches out for money only to be laughed at and excluded from a family gathering. The fact that sister-in-law always acts like a victim and holds everyone else accountable for her problems only serves to highlight how immature and careless she is. Even though karma isn't always immediate, it seems to have caught up with her in this instance. It's crucial for the rest of the family to uphold their boundaries and prevent the sister-in-law's toxic behavior from continuing to negatively impact their lives. Update. It's 2 a.m. and someone's at my window. Risk your life so I won't have to call the police. Sister-in-law update. I haven't had an update on sister-in-law since the party 2 weeks ago, but sister-in-law's performance intrigued hubby's uncle from Europe, and he wanted the tea. So, before he left Tuesday night, hubby and I went on a rant and resurrected this story from back in August 2022. It's a doozy. I wasn't sure about sharing it, but Reddit has been cathartic, and I'm ready to expel the audacities I've suffered at the hands of the inept witches this rock I live on loves to throw at me, and hubby. So here it goes. So, back before the $10 debacle, sister-in-law and hubby were on okay terms. She'd had a string of what she'd call bad luck, but I call karma. And we thought she finally realized that her crap does, in fact, stink. I mean, you have to grow up a little bit after getting dumped and being evicted. Genuinely concerned for sister-in-law as her big brother, hubby helped sister-in-law find a place only 10 minutes from ours so that we could keep an eye out for her. We even loaned her $700 from my personal savings to get her into the apartment before July, when she was slotted to be evicted from her former place. A young woman living by herself in our city is risky, and while her new apartment was super secure, hubby was nervous about her safety. Sister-in-law had only been in her apartment for a week or two, but she called hubby constantly. She needed him to fix her internet, fix her toilet, screw in a light bulb, grab the TV remote because she was too lazy. Was that last one a hyperbole? Yeah, but this girl did call hubby once to buy and deliver her water. Was she sick or immobile? No, she just didn't want to go to the store herself. Hubby started ignoring sister-in-law's calls and messages, which only resulted in even more calls and messages because, I guess in sister-in-law's mind, 40 no's and 1 yes is a yes. Anyway, one night, hubby and I were startled awake by a phone call. It was around 1:30 a.m. No good news ever comes at 1:30 a.m., so I was fully prepared for wailing and black shawls. I wondered if I had a black dress in the closet, if I had to ask my grandmother for one of her humongous Days of Our Lives black hats with the beaded netting and feathers to be a good Anglican griever, if I'd be expected to jump into the grave after the departed now that I'm pushing 30, as good Caribbean women won't do. Fun and jokes aside, I was absolutely effing terrified. Hubby answered the phone, and it was sister-in-law. Hubby almost hung up because what does she want at 1:30 a.m.? For him to tuck her into bed? To get her a warm glass of milk? But sister-in-law confirmed hubby's worst fears. There was someone outside her bedroom window. Sister-in-law said she was drifting off to sleep on her couch watching Love Island or Love is Blind or some crap that I know is enjoyable for many, but for some reason conjures the smell of battery acid in my head. But then sister-in-law heard a knock at her front door. She looked out her window and saw a shadow, and then came another knock. She ran to her bedroom, but the noise followed. She was calling us from under her blanket in her bedroom, listening to whatever it was rustling from the bushes outside. Hubby asked sister-in-law if she'd call the police. Sister-in-law went quiet. Then she said,
"Why should I? Can't you come?"
"Come out and do what?" I, furiously, cried out over hubby's shoulder into the phone, "Call the police!" Because what was hubby supposed to do? Summon his dormant Highlander blood and storm the darkness with a tire wrench? But then sister-in-law started crying, and hubby relented because he's too good for this world, and my dumb butt went with him because I'm 5'10" with knees the size and density of cannonballs and hands like cast iron pans. However, I only allowed this under one condition. Sister-in-law had to call the police. In my mind, we were only driving to the apartment to stay in the car and be near sister-in-law until the cops showed up. Dumb? Yes. But sometimes we do dumb things for the people we love. So we got to the apartment, which is a small duplex adjacent to the landlord's home. Hubby called sister-in-law to tell her we were in the car outside. She told us to come inside, which meant crossing about 20 yards of open night. Hubby said no, he wasn't going to drag me out into the night with a possible intruder in the yard. Sister-in-law told him to leave me in the car then. Hold the F up and take several seats. Hubby stared at the phone like it was roadkill guts on a steamy July afternoon. That definitely wasn't going to happen. We would wait for the police. Had she gotten a hold of them since hubby had last spoken to her? Silence. Well, what? Did the shadow, or God, come inside and swipe her tongue? No. Sister-in-law said she tried to call the police, but no one answered. I looked at hubby, hubby looked at me. Sister-in-law was trying to sell us goat crap, and we weren't buying. Hubby insisted sister-in-law try again. Literally half a minute after he hung up, sister-in-law called back. No one answered, she claimed. Hubby was seething. How could anyone answer? The phone probably only hiccuped on the cop's side. Did she really think she'd get a response in less than 30 seconds? Sister-in-law got defensive and said it didn't make any sense to call the police because she knew they'd never come. I'd had enough. I called the police myself. And guess what, y'all? They answered on the second ring. I gave the police the details sister-in-law had given me, and they promised someone would be right over. Apparently, there had been a burglary on sister-in-law's street already that week. Sister-in-law cried even harder when hubby called her and told her. Then sister-in-law told hubby that he needed to walk around her apartment at 1:30 to 2 o'clock a.m. to see if the would-be burglar was still there. Which, I was kidding about the tire wrench. So, yeah, no. Hubby is, of course, a tall, strapping, barrel-chested man with hair like fire and a chin at which Gaston himself would weep in envy. But hubby was not going to walk around a dark yard at 2 a.m. with a supposed villain in the bush. Either hubby or I must have spotted the landlord's storm lights, which were off but pointing in the direction of sister-in-law's apartment. Hubby reasoned that if the landlord turned on the lights, they would shine directly into the dark area in sister-in-law's backyard, which would at least scare off any intruders. No, sister-in-law said she couldn't call her landlord at 2 a.m. She might wake the woman up, and that would be so rude. Y'all. Then what are we? Effing bats? Why didn't she think it was rude to call us? When people talk about the breaking point, I wonder if they feel it. I wonder if it feels like a splinter and then a crack of searing heat. That's what I felt when this entitled brat said that she called hubby because she thought hubby would come to scare the intruder away for her. With what? Sister-in-law? With what? Some PVC pipe? The girl from the car hood? Maybe my umbrella. What if the intruder had a gun? Y'all. Sister-in-law told hubby to stop being a pussy and just walk around the apartment already. And that's when we left. Sister-in-law called us a couple dozen times on her way home. Hubby finally returned her calls after a pause in the deluge, thinking Ghostface must have finally silenced her. Unfortunately, no. She'd gotten sorted out, so we no longer served a purpose in her personal soap opera. The police had come, which woke up the landlord. The cops didn't find any evidence of an intruder, but they did determine that the front gate had been compromised at some point, and they told the landlord to fix it ASAP. Oh, and they also determined that the tenant in the apartment right next to sister-in-law's had a visit from her sneaky link that night. He might have knocked on the wrong door at first. Sister-in-law was furious with me for calling the police because I made her look like a fool in front of her landlord. I'd wasted the cops' time, and now sister-in-law's landlord thought she was high maintenance. If only hubby had left me home and just looked around the yard for sister-in-law like she'd asked him to. So, sister-in-law fully intended to send hubby into the darkness that night to face a predator she dared not face herself. She knew that an intruder would more than likely carry a knife or a gun, but she'd have sacrificed my husband, her brother, just so she wouldn't have to expend the energy to call the police or her landlord. Suffice to say, it's been a lovely 6 months since sister-in-law cut us off. We're enjoying her absence immensely, so much so that we're making this thing permanent. OP, the level of my surprise and annoyance at your sister-in-law's actions is beyond words. To see someone act so recklessly with their own safety and the safety of others is incredibly alarming and disappointing. She expected your husband to confront a potential intruder without thinking about his safety, which is not only extremely dangerous, but also selfish. It is obvious that your sister-in-law lacks fundamental responsibility and judgment. She chose to burden you and your husband with her unreasonable demands instead of taking the proper steps, like contacting the police or her landlord. It irritates me that she would put you both in danger in order to put her own convenience ahead of her landlord's comfort. She simply lacks accountability, as evidenced by the way she responded when you called the police. She lashes out and accuses you of making her look bad instead of being appreciative of your quick thinking and concern for her safety. She obviously gives her image and avoiding embarrassment more importance than her own health or the safety of those around her. I applaud you and your husband for putting your safety first and evacuating the area once it was obvious that your sister-in-law's demands were dangerously unrealistic. Establishing boundaries will help you safeguard yourself from such unreasonable behavior. It appears that keeping your distance from sister-in-law is the best course of action in light of her behavior and disregard for other people. It's unfortunate that it has come to this, but you should always put your own health and sanity first. Thank you for joining us today on Our Lounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to say regarding today's content, share that with us in the comments below. See you next time.